Should the government be able to decide whether parents can or cannot take their children for private treatment? That and more shall be discussed today on episode 55 of the Scottish Liberty Podcast with me, Antony Sammeroff, and this dude.
Tom Laird.
That funky.
Well, I certainly am a bit funky today because I didn't have a shower this morning. So
I have to share a podcast studio with you.
I'm up to level 42 in my funkiness.
Right. Well, you'll have to go down to Parliament then. So, recently, you can't tune into the news but to hear about this Charlie Gard Treatment Controversy story. Will you fill us in on the story, and then we'll pick it apart like a bunch of libertarian vultures circling overlands?
Well, basically, this is another instance of where the medical profession and the legal profession seem to be superseding the wishes of the parents. Okay, this young boy was born with a condition, serious condition, and is deteriorating. And he was deteriorating to the state where the medical staff felt it was appropriate to withdraw treatment and put him into palliative care. You know, the pathway to peace, as they euphemistically call it.
I call it starving someone to death.
Basically, yeah, you're just letting them die. And the parents objected to that. They said, you know, this is our kid. We want to try. If there's a slim chance, we want to be able to try and take it. And they outlined a treatment that was available abroad.
An experimental treatment, so it's not been tried on this condition.
Yeah, not been tried in this condition, and on a child with, I believe the parents have a condition as well that contributes to this. But anyway, bottom line is it's been kicked about like a football back and forth to court. The local court said the hospital are right, better for the child apparently, to let it die. The High Court then agreed. They appealed. The High Court agreed with the court. It was appealed again, and the Supreme Court has agreed with the High Court and the local court's decision, and therefore the parents of the child aren't allowed to, people have intervened. Donald Trump's not intervened, but they've offered to intervene. Donald Trump even has offered to intervene. The Pope and the Vatican have offered to put this child into their hospital. The parents have crowdfunded about £1.5 million.
£1.3 million they were able to.
That's a chunk of change, right? They were able to get in crowdfunding. And so it's not as if they're asking the NHS or the government to pay for this stuff. They're willing to do it themselves. And yet, the courts and the medical profession can intervene and tell you what to do with your own child. I mean,
not just what to do, but to force you to allow it to die.
Now, what baffles me is apparently it's a woman's right to choose. So while the child is in the womb, it's a woman's right to choose. As soon as the child, you know, apparently the vaginal canal confers some sort of magical personhood or something.
Well, I think that the vaginal canal confers something magical.
Indeed, but that's another story.
But usually I like to enter it from the other end.
Well, yeah. Dude, there's nothing sacred here. Right? Okay, so as soon as a child pops out, suddenly it's not a woman's right to choose anymore, or even any parent's fucking right to choose. Suddenly it's nothing to do with the parents, it's the medical profession and the legal professions. Now, the medical profession, I at least think, have a stake in the game. They've got something to chip in, something to offer, something to say. But at the end of the day, it's your kid. But for the legal profession able to come in and say, well, we're going to enforce the hospital's position. Personally, as a libertarian, I find that abhorrent.
It's morally abhorrent.
Yeah. Morally reprehensible. Now, and more on just fucking rang, by the way.
And they had this case that they were making, which was like, oh, well, if the treatment's successful, abroad, he's going to be sick all his life, and then he's going to be entitled to all this NHS treatment. I mean, talk about we free marketeers are told that we're the ones that put the almighty dollar above human life, and here you have a bunch of NHS, you know, oh, he's going to be a burden on the system. Well, do you know what? They raised £1.3 million. I think that's probably enough to cover his medical expenses for life. I don't know, but here's the thing. What this speaks to is, I think the reason why this is such a big story in the public mind is it speaks to a bigger sort of dilemma which we've been facing maybe since the 60s, which is there's a certain group of people that believe that experts should decide everything.
Yeah.
You know, that those experts, and of course the experts are in government, not the experts in business, of course, because, you know, all they care about is profit, but the intellectual class who hate the free market, broadly speaking, because they are more intelligent than most people, and yet they won't be able to make a better living than your average businessman who they're more intelligent than on a free market because they're not skilled. They think it's a terrible thing that people with practical skills make more money than intellectuals. And because they can't come to power in the market, they think they know how society should be run better than the market, and that they should be in government and select the experts in every field to make decisions on behalf of the public in a paternalistic way, because, you know, people, especially working class people, they just don't know what's best for them. If you leave them to their own devices, all they'll do is drink soda, eat Burger King, watch soaps, and, you know, we know how to spend their money better than they do. We know how to spend their money for their own good. And I think the reason why this story is so big is it speaks to that dilemma, which is technocrats or the intellectual elite versus the individual, right? Do the experts decide, or does the individual decide? And I think that's why this is massive. What do you think? Do you think that's why this is sweeping the public consciousness, because an example of this dilemma?
Well, this is the second time. And I think there's echoes of this, and I think this is fresh in the public's memory. There was a case not so long ago now, and being a bungling amateur, I forgot to have it ready on I've got it here somewhere. There was a case of a similar nature where we had a child in medical care, and here it is. Ashia King was the name of the kid, and the parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, which had no bearing or relevance on the case whatsoever. But the press made a big thing about it as if it was something in connection with, you know, blood transfusions and all that. But it was nothing to do with it. The kid's parents wanted to take the child from Britain to the Czech Republic to get proton beam therapy for treatment for either leukemia or cancer, and that therapy was not available on the NHS in the UK. So the parents says, "Look, he's our kid. We want to take him," and they said no, and it was deteriorating. So the parents just up and took the kid away to the Czech Republic. There was a national an outcry in the press. People weren't, having a national outcry, but the press and national, and they actually used the word abducted. Right? They abducted their own child from a hospital and decided to take him to the Czech Republic for treatment. Now, they didn't act out in malice, right? They acted out. They were acting. Well, it's regardless, right? It's their child, and they wanted the best treatment, and it wasn't available in the NHS. But yet, again, medical, and I remember discussing this with somebody, and they went, "Oh, they went against the wishes of their doctor." Well, I'm really sorry.
The doctor works for them.
Exactly. I will put that up there with they went against the wishes of their fucking hairdresser, right? They went against the wishes of their local butcher. Okay, I don't give a you get doctors. I don't give a flying fuck, right? The doctor is there to serve you and your family. He's there to advise, and he's there to give you the best possible advice. However, the decision lies with you and your child. End of, in my book. So I think, and it turns out, and these people got arrested. They were arrested in Spain and held overnight, you know, when they could have actually been taken, you know, separated from their child. When they could have actually been there and getting the treatment already a lot earlier. And it turns out the parents were vindicated. I mean, the NHS in the end agreed to actually give the money to the National Health Service money to fund fund this medical treatment in the Czech Republic. So it turns out the parents were right in the end, which kind of helps. But even if they were wrong, they were still right in my view. This is fresh in a lot of people's memories. It's fresh in my memory. And yet here we have again the medical establishment in league with the legal system, the courts, overriding the rights of the parents. Now here's the shocking revelation that I've been enlightened to. You actually have no rights over your children anymore in Britain in the year 2017. Somewhere along the line we've missed this, but you have no parental rights anymore. The state has more rights over your children than you do, and that's frightening. The first step of any dictatorship is to separate parental authority from the children so that they have control over your children, so they can indoctrinate them. I'm going on a slight tangent here, but you know, so that they can indoctrinate them into the state's way of thinking, and not into their family's way of thinking or into their community's way of thinking, but into the state's way of thinking. Because we all know that the state's way of thinking is always best. Never, ever. So this is a great concern to me. Well, my daughter's old enough; she's 23 now, but I'm assuming at some point she will have her children. And it's sad. And my brother has recently had a young baby, and it's sad to realise that his parental authority would be undermined by a state who really doesn't give that much of a crap about your kid. You know,
no, it's just.
It's about establishing who's boss.
They give a crap in the same way that a farmer gives a crap about his cows. Do you know what I mean? And I don't mean a nice farmer. I mean, you know, that way that the factory farmists discovered that they could get more milk out of the cows by giving them a slightly bigger stall. Yeah. It's kind of like that here. Well, we can get more productivity out of you if we allow you to choose your own profession. So we'll stop this feudalism stuff and we'll let you choose your own profession. Well, there's a bigger stall, you know, you're better tax livestock.
So, and I guess, I mean, another thing that struck me is this young baby at the moment has, what is the actual condition? We looked it up earlier and it was a bit of a mouthful to pronounce. But it's pretty sick.
It's mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome. Now, for anyone who's interested, mitochondrial DNA. Now, you tend to think you've got as much DNA from your mum as you do from your dad, but actually there's also DNA around the nucleus of your cells, and they are transferred from your mum's egg. So actually you have more genetic material from your mum than from your dad. Now, this syndrome is a I'm not really sure exactly what it does. I'm trying to make sense of the Wikipedia page, but it's a bit advanced to me.
Well, it fucks you up is what it does. Right. You know, I'm not a medical, I'm not pretending to be a medical expert.
Okay. So this
I'm pretending to be someone who cares about individual rights and liberties.
Yeah, you're pretending to be.
At least for the benefit of our audience.
So no one
really, Antony and I are socialists. We just do this because it's we know we'll get a better audience. You know, the socialist market's saturated.
Right.
So we thought we'd do it to libertarians.
So look, this raises a couple of questions.
No, the point I was going to make is when they said they were going to give them palliative care, and this is at the point where they didn't know if they were going to have enough money to get this medical treatment abroad. They said, okay, well, look, if that's the case, if we're just going to let my kid die, then we want to take him home and let him die at home. They weren't even allowed to do that.
For
fuck's sakes. We're not going to, oh, but that's going to be detrimental. Detrimental, you're going to kill him, you know. That's what you're going to do, basically. You're going to put him on the pathway to peace and you're going to let him die. But somehow it's going to be detrimental to take him home. They don't even know. They don't know whether the kid's feeling any pain or anything like that. I mean, the mother seems to, I heard her speaking on the Radio 4 Today program, and she seems to be fairly intelligent and bright and reasonably articulate. And she says that she knows a little bit more about her child than the people in the hospital do. And she's pretty sure that the kid's not in a lot of discomfort or pain. But who knows? You know, but at the end of the day, it's a parental right and the right of the child. If there's a chance, you know, and somebody else is willing to pay, you know, they're not forcing at the point of a gun people to pay for this. Considering you can kill babies in the womb with taxpayers' money, you know, how's that for controversy? We'll get that one fucking going. You can kill babies in the womb with taxpayers' money, but you can't keep one alive with somebody else's money that they've paid voluntarily. You assholes! You know, Shomer Shabbos.
Shomer Shabbos.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question then. Let's just take this idea of parental authority to the extreme.
Okay.
What if it's the other way around and the parent wants to deny a child care for religious reasons or something like that, or any reasons, oh, I don't believe in this technology, because do the parents have the right to deny care that could save their child's life?
I guess so.
Yeah, you think so?
I think possibly so. I mean, you could argue, and it's a good question. It is a good question. You fucker. I guess you could make the case that the child is an individual and it has individual rights.
I think that's the side I'd come on. Yeah.
But does it have a right to travel?
Well, this is the thing, right? See if you put your child in the cellar.
Does it have a right to work?
If at the age of 3 it's capable of it,
Right, okay.
I guess it does.
Child labour laws are ruining this fucking country.
Right. So I would say that I prefer, obviously, if it weren't the state that was the agency that intervened, but if you say, put your child in the cellar, please don't. It's not a suggestion. Okay. And you don't give them food and things like that. You're essentially letting them die. You're murdering them. If you are not willing to allow that child treatment that could save their life, then I think you're basically forfeiting the right to the child, and someone who wants to adopt the child should have the right to adopt
So
them.
you don't think there's such thing as an inalienable right in terms of parents?
Well, there might be some inalienable rights, but for parents towards their children, but I don't know what they are. I think that you're basically forfeiting your right. Like, see if you put your dog outside and don't feed him and neglect him, he's not really your dog anymore. So then if the neighbor wants to put food out for him and attract him over,
it's your property. Dogs are property.
If you put your stuff in the trash, right, and then they come and take away your garbage, someone can go through that and take your unfinished burger and eat it. Please don't. Or they can take your Kindle that you didn't need.
But they haven't put the dog in the bin.
You discarded it.
You just said they put it outside, they're not feeding it.
Okay. And they don't intend to feed it either. You've basically just
How do you know that?
Because with every right comes a responsibility. This is what we say. Like, see if you've got a right to have a factory, but you don't have a right to pollute a river.
That's
right?
an externality, I suppose.
Okay. Right. So I'm saying that why is that? Because you're right, or you've got a right to own a river, but you've not got a right to pollute the river in such a way that pollution will go off into someone else's property and damage it.
How will, right? Okay, with the dog scenario, there's you.
Yeah,
there's you and the dog, and then there's your neighbours. How does the death of the dog affect your neighbours?
It doesn't. But what I'm saying is, your right to the dog includes a responsibility to the dog.
Are you allowed to kill the dog if you want? Outright.
Oh, I'm not sure, man. Maybe if you, I think that you'd be unsure around putting it up for adoption and killing it if you didn't want it.
But if it's your property, I mean, a dog at the end of the day is property.
Well,
even though it's
this is pretty controversial. This come up on Facebook recently because someone, the discussion group, saying it was libertarian vegans, and he was saying there would be more fox hunting and stuff like that in a libertarian society. And the guy is a friend of mine, libertarian minded. He's not a full-blown Rothbardian or anything like that, but he's very considered conscious about animal welfare, and he doesn't like those hunts and things. He says, well, if it's your property, you're allowed to hunt foxes, but if I come and protest, which personally I think if you want to do some good for animals, like protesting fox hunts is probably pretty low down on the priorities list.
Right.
In my personal opinion, are animals property? I don't know, man. I really don't. I think that they're a different, if they are property, they're a different kind of property. And people say they're your children, but that's just a rhetorical. You don't mean, when you say it's your children, you don't mean that the child belongs to you. He's not property. The child isn't property. It's your child.
Well, it's not property in the same way that a chair or a table or a house is property.
So we've got a continuum there.
Okay.
We're on one extreme, it's my wife. Well, just because she's my wife doesn't mean she's my property. Then it's my child, who's less my property than my wife is. Then my dog, who's less, my property. Then
how is your kids less your property than your wife? Your wife's not your property. Why would your child be?
Because she's entered into a mutual contract with me, where we surrendered part of ourselves essentially to one another. So in a way, if I'm married,
in the sense that you've created your children,
right? But they don't belong to you. They're God. They belong to God, or whatever.
Or they belong to themselves.
They belong to themselves,
but they have no agency.
But you are basically what you are is you're like a trust fund manager of your child. What you're doing is you're taking care of that child for his future self.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why I think maybe in an anarcho-capitalist society, if your parents really fucked you up in ways that were blatantly obvious, maybe you could even sue them because it's your property that they're fucking up.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the maybe tiny discussion today. Here's maybe the tiny flaw in your arguments. If you can say that the court can intervene and say that you must your child medical treatment, okay, then by the same logic, the court can intervene to say that you cannot give your child medical treatment.
No, because the whole point,
their whole point is that the medical treatment is not guaranteed to make the child better. In fact, it may make it worse. So what's happened is the court is making a decision based on probabilities.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if you want to let a child die, then you're not entitled to that child. Basically, it's basically like putting the child out in the trash. At which point, anyone who wants to adopt that child, I think the libertarian principle would be if anyone wants to adopt that child, they'd have a right to it because you basically forfeited. By forfeiting your responsibilities, you're also forfeiting your rights. Okay. Now, I'm sure, like, I would love it if even our SoundCloud listeners, I know a lot of people listen to this on iTunes and podcasting apps. If you've got an opinion on this, please roll on to the YouTube video after you've listened to this. I know you're listening to it in the car on your way to work. When you get home, plug in, go to the YouTube video and leave us some comments because I think this is one of the most interesting topics we've had.
Is there anybody dropped a comment?
Yeah, we've even had 5. Just someone dropped a comment to say that they've shared the show. Riley says, thanks for covering this story. The state loves to kill more than it wants life. Not only is the state a criminal gang, it's a gang of murderers. Thank you for that, Riley Blake. Studio 4K. Would the government try to kill the kid if he was black or Jewish? Now, that's an interesting question. Do you think if the kid was black or Jewish, would people start making this about race? Is that?
Yeah, well, it's a possibility that they would
They'd
go.
say,
Like,
"Oh, it's
if
eugenics."
this kid was white, you can bet your bottom dollar that they would, that they would try and keep this kid alive.
Right.
I think that's a possibility, but it's a bit presumptuous for me to say that. But I think they could make a race. Well, they could always make a race issue. They can make a race issue out of anything where there's race involved.
It's true.
So yeah, they could say this white establishment doesn't give a shit about black kids.
So how about you, Studio 4K? What do you think? Leave your comment and we'll read it out.
Yeah.
Now this brings me on to another topic,
Okay.
which is related. He had genetic defects, I think.
Mm.
So what? There's something like 24 genetic defects or more than that in the human genome, which is all the genes we have, that basically lead to horrendous outcomes. And most people are likely to pop their clogs before they enter their mid-teens if they have one of these genetic conditions. So what is the view, what is the libertarian view on screening people, embryos that have are susceptible to one of these horrendous diseases that's going to kill someone off? Now, I know you're against abortion. I mean, like, supposing you were a couple and you were at a risk of giving birth to a child with one of these serious conditions.
Yeah.
You could mix your sperm and egg. It's not as fun as doing it the traditional way, but you can mix up your sperm and your egg in a dish.
Yeah.
Don't try this at home. The doctors
bake for 50 minutes.
The doctors can screen the say you've got 5 embryos there.
Yeah.
Screen them and
pinch of salt
and choose the ones that definitely won't have this defect, and then put them back in the uterus. And so this wouldn't be a case of abortion. Well,
okay.
If that is possible to do, are you for it or against?
Well, I guess I'm for people's right to choose to do that if they so wish. My concern would be that the state mandates it.
I wouldn't be for that.
Yeah. Or that the state mandates. Basically that would be my concern. And that people would start. There's 2 issues, I think. One is, like, first of all, screening and finding out. And what's the purpose of that? Is it to screen so that you can find out if your kid's going to have the possibility of a genetic disorder which you want to wipe out? And that brings concerns in of itself, because you can start getting into eugenics. And then there's the issue of the state then mandating and saying, well, you have to have this screen, because let's say you decide not to do that, and you decide to go ahead anyway. Should the state be able to step in and say, well, you shouldn't be allowed to do that because you're taking a risk that's unacceptable with the child, that it could end up with a genetic disorder, and therefore the state's going to step in and force you to either abort that or force you to, basically to abort it. You can't do that. We'll force you to not go ahead with a normal birth process because there's a chance of a genetic disorder.
Or just like.
But I have no problem with an open free market and people saying, well, I choose to choose the color of my child's eyes, or whether they're going to be.
You're for the designer babies or people's right.
I'm not for designer babies, but I'm for people's right to choose that.
So if we get to the point where technologically we can, let's remove that gene and put this gene inside while the embryo is in the womb,
really,
to play God, so to speak. What's the libertarian position on that? Is it a violation of the non-aggression principle to mess up the gene, you might actually be improving the genes but you're still messing with it, of the unborn baby. And I think if we had a magic wand and we could get rid of these 24 odd genetic defects from the human genome, so no one would have one of these conditions again, that would be wonderful. But but that would be in a magic wand situation. You can't go around like carving everyone open to hunt down the last remnants.
Okay, but I know.
genes.
Well, let's look at something that's a genetic disorder like Down syndrome.
Right.
Okay. There are all varying degrees of people with Down syndrome. Some people who have it lead a reasonably normal and fulfilled life. Who's to say that that life is not valid? Who's to say that that person is not valid, and that you treat it like something that has to be eradicated?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I guess Down syndrome is something unnatural in the sense that it came about, or is it? It's not.
No, it's when someone's got 3 chromosomes instead of 2.
Exactly. They're just different.
Right.
They're just different kinds of people, and I don't necessarily see it as a disability. So, and there's lots of parents with Down syndrome children, and there's lots of people with Down syndrome themselves who would be against that, saying like, you know, what right do you have to call what we have some sort of disease and try to eradicate it? You know, we're just different. We're you know, and I have real concerns about the morality of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's to do with the sort of projection where you know who you are and your capacities, and you see a Down syndrome child or adult and you think, oh, I'd hate to be like that. Therefore, there's something wrong with that. But you always feel like that. Like, I would like to be anyone other than myself. Like, I feel like myself. I want to be me. Like, even if you said I could be some rock star who I really admire, I like being me. Like, and everyone has that innate sense of that there's something precious about them, you know, about themselves, something precious. And you're just projecting. Like, again, you know, culturally and things like that, you see people in other countries who don't have the advantages that you do, and you think, oh, I'd hate that. But the brain's a great normalizer, and whatever you're used to, it tends to see as normal. And you'd be surprised how many people in poor countries are happier than you are. I mean, I had a friend of mine that went to Cambodia, and he was like, oh my God, like the people there were so poor, but they were so much happier than people in Scotland. Like, they were so chilled and they smiled and they laughed and they joked all the time.
I mean, I don't know whether it's a stereotype, and it might well be, because there could be somebody out there listening who is Down syndrome or has a child with Down syndrome. You know, you always hear, like, on average, children with Down syndrome are kind of happier.
Well, you see,
happy kids. Yeah, happy kids. So, I mean, I don't know if that's true or it's a stereotype, but then, you know, that's what I hear, and maybe it is.
And they get special attention.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think it's fine for people to be able to screen if they choose. I mean, if nothing else, it might give you the heads up so that you can prepare. I guess nothing can prepare, but you can prepare so that you can go, well, okay, I know I'm going to have a Down syndrome kid, and here's how we're going to deal with it, or try to deal with it. And you can get counselling, and you can get, you know, the support groups there for you to help you deal with that. Again, I'm talking about it as if it's some kind of disease, but the fear or the concern is that then that leads to mandatory screening and then mandatory terminations, which I can't get behind.
No, I don't think.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not any worse, in my view, to terminate a child because it's got Down syndrome, or terminate a child just because you can't be arsed having it, or terminate a child because you can't afford it, or terminate a child for any other reason. I don't think it's personally any more morally reprehensible to terminate Down syndrome children, but I don't think it's morally. Look, fine, have the availability of the screening, but I'm just concerned about where it would go. I mean, I don't know, we're kind of off at a tangent here.
Well, I mean, that's what we're doing a show for. Like, I have a bunch of tangents. I think the thing about I just wanted to finish my point on people being happier. It's one of these things about human psychology. You know, if you've got an empty belly, you've only got one problem. As soon as you've got a full belly, that's like a million problems. Do you know what I mean?
With Maslow's triangle of
needs. Your hierarchy of needs. I think for animals, life is complete when their belly is full. It's like, oh, well, I'm fed, I'm happy now. Whereas for a human being, your life only begins when your belly's full. Like, now that my basic needs are met, I've got to make a choice. Am I going to be a musician and poor, but happier, or am I going to be an information technology expert and I'll get more money, but I'll have to give up playing gigs at the weekend? You know, you have all these choices to make. So
I mean, I don't want to get into the wedge fallacy too much, but you know, where does it stop? If you can screen for these kind of things, do you end up with a situation where it's like, well, we don't want people who are too tall, too small, too fat? There's a good chance your child might suffer from obesity. You know, there's all sorts of things that people might find undesirable or desirable in terms of traits, and I wouldn't stop other people from, well, the abortion things are different, but I wouldn't stop other people from having designer babies and from doing the screening. But I don't think I'd personally get involved in it. Well, I just don't want any more kids anyway. I'm not even going to get married, don't start me on that. But yeah, I wouldn't stop other people from doing the screening, but I just have concerns about what the end game is.
Isn't the screening for good genetics meant to be the dating process? So we've been screening
subconsciously. You might. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess. When you're looking at subconsciously, supposedly when men are looking at women, we're looking at women who have got good teeth, nice eyes,
nice
childbearing hips, all that bollocks. So I guess that's what you're doing. So I guess you're already screening and discriminating. Maybe it's something I just need to think longer and harder about. It poses all sorts of questions. We're going down a rabbit hole here, I guess.
Save us having to get the answers ourselves by dropping back our
lazy motherfuckers. Yeah, why are we asking? We're asking you.
We're asking you. Come, swing down into the comments and let us know what you think. Educate us.
Yeah.
So shall we go on to our...
Can anybody make a good case against, and anybody make a good case for? We're interested in hearing from you.
Excellent. Shall we go on to our next story?
We have another story.
Yes.
Fucking lucky people, right? How good is it going to get, right? As if that wasn't a fucking tremendous start. We've even got another story. Okay, Antony, tell these lucky people what the other story is.
Well, we have our special feature, the
It's another cuck-a-doodle-doo.
Who's the cuckold doodle dude of the week? You were watching the Red Pill documentary last night.
I was watching the Red Pill documentary. Red Pill documentary. For those of you who don't know, Cassie J, formerly a self-professed feminist, decided to make a documentary about the men's movement called The Red Pill.
The Red Pill.
Controversial.
Antony
and I looked into bringing the movie here to the UK. We discussed it, and it looked as if nobody would touch it with a barge pole because of the controversy it would bring.
But also
feminists, feminists were dead against it. One wanted to boycott. They hadn't even seen the goddamn thing yet, but they wanted to boycott it. And I mean, once you see the documentary, you go, well, you know, what was it you found so objectionable in that, other than somebody dared to question the sisterhood? That's my take on it anyway. However, in the process of watching the Red Pill, and I urge you, it's on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, it's available for free on Amazon Prime at the moment. But if not, you can rent it on Amazon Prime for about £2.99 or something like that. It's well worth it. It's a good enough documentary. It has its problems, but I think it's a really good documentary and worth watching. However, they obviously interviewed a few feminists to get their side of the story, and
am I right in thinking that none of them really knew the men's issues? Like they didn't have a good knowledge.
They didn't have a really good knowledge, but they basically stuck by the trope that the men's movement was basically full of misogynists, and that it was a hate group. Somebody actually said that.
Well, you're in it.
And they made the allegation, as a matter of fact, that the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Centre, had designated men's rights activists as a hate group. However, on further investigation by Cassie J, it turned out that the Southern Poverty Law Centre made no such statement at any time that they thought that the men's rights activist movement was a hate group. This is just more feminist drivel. However, in the course of her interviews, she interviewed who I believe to be King Cuck.
King Cuck.
King Cuck. That's a bit masculine for him. Probably kind of like.
Sorry,
probably do jazz hands. Right?
For anyone listening to the podcast, that was me beating on my chest.
It's just sounding a bit hollow. So it's like somebody beating on a flute with a couple of straws. But anyway,
sounds like this.
There's probably a fetish. There's probably a fetish about that summer. If we could just return to sanity for a moment, semi-sanity.
I've certainly got a semi.
So Michael Kimmel. Right, Michael Kimmel, King
bad
Cuck,
person. He's a very bad person.
He's just the worst kind of male, gynocentric, big mammy's boy.
Was it
male feminist?
Not just a white knight, but
it's not even a white knight. A white knight's somebody really who's on the right. It's kind of like, I'll save you. He's not that. It's worse than a white. It's a soft cock.
That's
it's a mangina.
It's kind of like a soft cock, a cuck. All of these things.
Yeah, he's not a white knight. A white knight is more of the macho.
He's got this story that he always
kind of thing.
He's got this story that he always tells about. Well, I was in this group with a bunch of women, and one woman said, "Well, when I look in the mirror." A black woman said, when I look in the mirror in the morning, I just see, I see a black woman who's confident, who's this, who's that other. And one of the other women was like, oh, I'm really touched because when I look in the mirror, I don't even see a white woman. I just see a woman. And he was like, and that's when I realized that when I look in the mirror, I don't see a man. I just see a human being. And that just shows that I'm somehow gender privileged.
Do you know what? I have to say this, right? What would happen if one of these fucking idiots got mugged, right? Imagine you're the poor police fucking investigator that has to take a statement. Can you describe the person that mugged you? Well, were they black? Are they white? Well, I mean, I don't see race, so I've no idea, Well, were they male or female? Again, I don't really see gender. I don't see gender. I don't see race. I don't see age. I don't want to
presume their gender.
I don't even know if they were a human being. An organism, mugged me and took my wallet. Fuck off. How the hell are we supposed to find the person who stabbed you and took your money when you can't even give a fucking basic description of a human being because, it might be presumptuous?
Right. No.
You arse.
But it sounds like we just don't like the guy. We should have given the grounds.
Well, funnily enough, I don't.
He's a traitor. He's a
gender traitor.
He's a gender traitor. He's a traitor to men. Right.
I think he's a traitor to reason.
Okay, that's more. Okay, so that's the first crime.
And truth.
The thing is, he was approached to head this Center for the Study of Men and Masculinities. Not masculinity, masculinities, like plural, as though that's actually a thing. They just say it like humanities.
Not one masculinity. There's also masculinities.
No, but
I'm a bit of a masculine tease.
Yeah, tease. Are you? Yeah. Here's the thing.
That was terrible. But,
he had an opportunity.
Watch live shit. Right? Okay. Go for it. Sorry, Antony.
He had an opportunity as someone who's appointed to this center, who's going to advise the government and things like that, to get the men's issues, which are really important, addressed. The high rate of male suicide, the homelessness. Depression, suicide. Yeah, we said suicide. Okay. I don't know if you consider this a man's issue, or not, but those at least who consider themselves liberal. Yeah. Imagine women were doing something like 97-98% of the most dangerous jobs and the most unpleasant jobs. Yeah. Feminists would definitely see that as an issue.
Imagine the body bags that were coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq were filled with women,
right,
and daughters instead of sons.
Okay, imagine that, so basically, okay, fair enough. As a free marketeer, I'm okay with that. If you want to take a dangerous job to get more money, that's your choice. And men are more interested in doing that than women. But just in the interests of even paying lip service to this idea that feminists care about equality. These are the kind of issues that would be discussed if this centre was based on women's issues.
Yeah.
Sorry, based on those claims. Now, instead, he gave the dialogue from the feminists' point of view.
Yeah.
In fact, not a single person on this board was not a prominent feminist.
No, it's a joke.
You had Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda, and that woman that wrote the vagina monologues. What's her name? Eve Ensler.
Yeah, Eve Ensler. Yeah.
Now, it's an interesting point, actually, because Gloria Steinem was asked to appear in the Red Pill documentary, and she declined because, in her own words, she didn't know enough about the issues. Well, first of all, it's her freaking job to know about the issues. She's the most prominent feminist in the world, maybe. And secondly, if she doesn't know enough about the issues to appear in the documentary, why is she accepted a board place for the Centre of the Studies of Men and Masculinities? It's just a gesture. So the thing is, if they're not talking about the authoritative text, The Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell, it's a farce, right? You don't have to agree with Warren Farrell's claims, but you at least need to address them and take them seriously. He's sold out men everywhere by pretending that he's addressing male issues, but he's just furthering this idea of men as abusers, as inherently violent, by saying, well, the pressure on men is to this toxic masculinity and all these feminist talking points. Why don't you go to the men and find out what their issues are? Warren Farrell wrote a book called Why Men Are the Way They Are, and how he did it was he started 500 men's groups and 500 women's groups, and he listened to the men. And after listening to all those men, he discovered that they all face similar issues. Yeah. So he distilled those issues into a book and said, these are the issues that these are the issues that the Centre of Studies for Men and Masculinity should be addressing, the ones that are important to men. And we hear all this stuff like, oh, history is men's studies. Well, actually,
it's his story, and it should be her story.
Right. The whole point of women's studies was that it critiqued the pressures on women and gave them another option for being if they wanted to go into the workplace or do something else other than their traditional role. But the only thing that history does is not critique men's role, but promote it. You know, you study, oh, that guy was a great conqueror, like, oh, that guy, you know, whatever. It's all about war. Okay, oh, those men sacrificed for their country. It's only just pushing, history is just pushing male disposability, basically.
Right.
It's not the same as what men's studies would be, which is to say, well, you know, these are the traditional roles that men went by. If you want them, cool, keep them. If you don't want them, kick them out.
Here's what disturbs me, amongst other things. In this dialogue, or even lack of dialogue, serious, meaningful dialogue between genders, it seems abundantly clear to me that what is bad for one gender will, in the end, be automatically bad for the other gender. Because women have husbands, they have sons, they have brothers, they have boyfriends, right? And conversely, men have daughters, wives, sisters. When you believe in patriarchy and you accept patriarchy, here's what you actually have to believe, ladies, if you actually believe in patriarchy. You actually have to believe, and here, in a sense, the extreme radical feminists are right. There's no point in dialogue with men because we're sociopaths. In order to be able to systematically oppress, beat down, hate, hurt those people who are the closest to us in our lives, who have some of the closest relationships we'll ever have, mothers, daughters, sisters, loved ones that are female. In order for us to be able to do that, we would need to be complete sociopaths as a gender. And that's an offensive thing in itself. But it just seems abundantly clear to me that if it's bad for men, you know, why wouldn't you want, you know, if you really care about women and you really care about women's well-being, then surely half the battle, at least, would be to take care of men's issues as well. Otherwise, what goes around comes around.
Yeah, we're all eating from the same pot. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So this is the thing. This is just the whole feminism third wave, fourth wave thing has done nothing but
I think we're on seventh wave now or something.
Sow the seeds of hatred and division between men and women.
Horse shit.
It's more divide and conquer. So I just got a quote for Warren Farrell here. How are men's issues as defined by feminists different from men's issues as defined by other men? Feminists define men's issues require acknowledgement of patriarchy and the power bias it gives men, encourages men to forfeit their power. Once men are seen as having the power, domestic violence is seen as an expression of male power, leaving women off the hook when they initiate, hence the Violence Against Women Act, but no Violence Against Men Act. Through this feminist prism, it expands the definitions of date rape and heterosexual rape, but ignores prison rape. It emphasizes women's greater contributions to housework and childcare, but treats men's greater contributions to income as male privilege rather than male contribution. Now, the number of men in their life who've given up their dreams of being a writer or a musician so they could take a stable job where they knew they were going to provide to their family, including their women, must run into the hundreds of millions. But that's not a contribution that feminists care to acknowledge. To go on with a quote, to my knowledge, no person who has taken a non-feminist perspective on these issues has ever received significant university or foundation funding or reached Michael's level of distinguished professor in any social science department at any university in the US. Well, there's your male privilege for you. I mean, it's so important to be a feminist that you will not rise to prominence in the social sciences unless you accept that position.
Yeah.
Neither my contacts nor my emails from readers around the world were able to identify a single men's studies course, and certainly no program or degree, that was not under feminist control. There are 7 scholarly journals in the field of feminist masculinity studies, and one, a recent one, in the field of men's studies that is not feminist controlled. The one is the New Male Studies. Its editor is Miles Groth, a Wagner College professor who built his reputation on the existential philosophy of Martin Heidegger. The connection between Heidegger and gender studies, both felt the original truths being sought got lost in seeking. Okay, make what you will of that. Maybe I give you more of that quote than was necessary.
Yeah.
So tell us what you think. What would you like us to cover on the show? And if you like the gender studies chat, one of our best episodes is quite recent. It's called The Myth of Patriarchy, where we systematically debunk the myth that we live in a patriarchy. I would like to encourage you to see that if you've not seen it yet. Nina Russ says, we do have responsibility of ourselves as individual independently by the gender. Where's the problem? Yes.
I'm not sure what she means by that. I'm assuming it's a she.
I think she means that if we have responsibility to ourselves as individuals, then gender becomes irrelevant, which is what you say. You know, men's rights is as absurd as women's rights because we're about individual rights. We're about the rights of the individual, and those are the same for all individuals, and unique and inalienable. Michael Kimmel.
Michael Kimmel, you are this week's
Cock-a-doodle-dude!
And I think you're well in the running for possibly Cock-a-doodle-dude of the year, maybe of the century, of eternity. Yeah. King of the Cucks.
Thank you for tuning into Scottish Liberty Podcast. Share this on your Facebook wall. Help us get to more.
Share it on a shithouse wall if you like. Just share it. Share that motherfucker.
Share that motherfucker. Tweet it out. If you see anyone discussing the Charlie Gard Treatment Controversy, please post the video as a comment on that thread. Until next time, be libertarians.
Don't be a righty.
Or lefty.